We all want love, but most of us don't want to date to get it. Because let's be honest, dating kind of sucks. But maybe it doesn't have to if we actually know what we're doing. Hi, I'm Sabin, and this is Reinventing Dating, a smart and sweary podcast for all singles to learn the mindsets and skills to date with intention and confidence. Join me weekly as I break down the science and psychology behind what's working in our dating culture and what isn't. Every week, I bring a new topic, trend, skill, or mindset that can help us get out of our own way to learn how to date for relationships that we actually want. Because love isn't broken, but dating kinda is. But I'm reinventing it. Let's do this. Well, hello there, sugar pants. Welcome to a bonus episode of the Reinventing Dating podcast. Now, I'm sure we haven't forgotten about this yet, but last year, a pretty mind-blowing documentary came out called The Tinder Swindler. And I did a podcast breaking down entire episodes and talking about what we can learn from what happened to these women who were scammed on Tinder. And since we're right now in the Swipe Stories online dating series, I thought it was really good for us to go back to this. And if you haven't watched it, it's a frustrating and eye-opening, mind-blowing documentary to watch. But then come over here and listen to what I have to say about it. Not just, this is bad, but how to truly prevent things like this happening, how to watch out for different things so that nothing like this ever happens to you. But later this week, I'm going to be diving into romance scams. And guys, they are not what you think that they are anymore. It's not just like the Tinder Swindler. There is a lot of weird ass shit going out on dating apps that we need to be aware of so that you guys can prevent it and we don't stop believing in love because there's a few shitty people out there. All right, listen up and tell me what you guys think. I just took like 17 pages of notes for this podcast. But I want to quickly, before we move on to the topic today, and it's going to tie in, I want to do, of course, a really important kind of random science fact or random brain fact for today. And it's about cognitive biases. And one in particular, the cognitive bias, emotional reasoning. So I'm actually going to put a great article about emotional reasoning from Psychology Today in the show notes, but let's start off a little bit about talking about what is cognitive bias. Honestly, one of my favorite things that I've learned in the last 10, 15 years is that there are cognitive biases. They're sometimes called thinking traps. They can be cognitive distortions, but basically, I love this definition. It's a systematic error in cognitive processing, like thinking, perceiving, and memory, diverging from rationality, which can affect judgments. If we think of the human brain as a computer, cognitive bias basically is an error in the code, making us perceive the input differently or come up with an output that's illogical. So most people don't know this, but we are moving through our days and through our lives with cognitive biases due to past experiences, trauma, personality, a lot of different things. You may have heard the expression rose-colored glasses, right? Like you're seeing things through rose-colored glasses. I like to use the expression shit-colored glasses too, because sometimes when the negative bias, that's a real bias, everything can feel and look like shit, even when it's not. But I love learning about cognitive biases because it's just such a helpful tool to step back and go, wait, is what I'm doing or what I'm thinking or what I'm perceiving actually true? Or is this just my brain running on automatic from a past situation? And it happens, guys. It happens all the time. I can guarantee that if you right now, after the podcast, obviously, sat down and Googled thinking traps or cognitive biases or any of those, because they're kind of different and there's a lot of information out there, you would start looking at some of them and going, oh shit. Yeah, I probably do that. Yep, I probably do that. It's a thing. It's a thing. And it's a thing not to beat yourself up over, but it's a thing that is a awesome tool, which is what we're fucking doing here at Relationship Quotient, to make sure that we are making the best decisions, right? For who we choose in our life, who we choose to have relationships with, how we show up in those relationships. All of this is very important, right? It's not just we fall with our eyes closed and hope for the best. That's not what relationships really are. And we'll definitely be discussing that today. But we all have biases. And it's good to make sure that they are not keeping us single or keeping us in unhealthy relationships or keeping us just shut down from relationships in our life. Because I don't give a shit if you never want a romantic relationship. But as humans, we all need connection for survival. I don't give a fuck if you don't want a partner, right? Like, I think everybody assumes that I'm definitely trying to make sure that everybody has love and everybody has their soulmate or the one. And that's not what I'm doing here. What I'm saying is that every day, throughout the day, we are talking to people, we are invested in people, we are surrounded by people. So let's have the best friendships and relationships possible to make that all feel good and worthwhile and not exhausting. So I can see this podcast is going to be long. So the cognitive bias that I am discussing today is called the emotional reasoning bias. Okay? Emotional reasoning bias. An emotional reasoning is a cognitive process by which an individual concludes that their emotional reaction proves something is true, despite contrary empirical evidence or facts that tell you it isn't. So emotional reasoning creates an emotional truth, which may be in direct conflict with the actual perceptional truth. Another way, here's a couple of I like to share different kinds of definitions because different kind of definitions like resonate with different kinds of learning in people. Another way to look at this is you rely on your gut feelings over objective evidence to judge yourself in the world. Right now, I have a lot of thoughts and a lot of questions about listening to your gut. I actually did a podcast probably a year or two ago about it. And my own thoughts are evolving about this, right? I love to talk about how I process the OM and as well as the RQ is an evolving, like living and breathing process because new information is coming to light all the time. And things that I knew or believed 10 years ago are not necessarily things that I know and believe now. So if you are relying fully on your emotions, fully on your gut or gut checks, and not actually also bringing in facts, truths, then you are probably living with an emotional reasoning bias. And this happens a lot when we're dating. A lot, right? A lot when we're quote unquote falling in love with someone. We assume that because we feel a certain way, what we think must be true. And you're going to love, I'm just going to give you this tip right now, heads up right now. This is going to tie 100% into the podcast today. Here are some examples of different ways emotional reasoning bias show up in our brain and in our life. So, example, I feel embarrassed, so I must be an idiot. I feel awkward, so other people must think I'm awkward. So what we feel, we just think is a truth. I feel nervous, so that means something bad is going to happen. I feel lonely, so that means I don't have any friends. Now, you can feel lonely because loneliness is a perception, and also know deep down you have friends or you have family or you have people who truly care about you. Here's some other examples of emotional reasoning that show up. You can't help feeling fat, right? So by the way, I took these from articles. I will share those. So if you're a little bit like, I don't like that one, I didn't write them, but I did think that they were helpful. So you can't help feeling fat, though your doctor and those around you tell you that your weight lies comfortably in a healthy range. And that's obviously a big controversy right now of what that actually is. But we're really looking at the perception. Like the truth, what the truth is, but you can't help feeling that. And that then becomes your truth. You feel guilty about something, so you conclude you must be guilty, even though there's absolutely no evidence that you've done anything wrong or others have assured you of this. Here's a big one about relationships. In your relationship, you struggle with feelings of jealousy. You can't resist accusing your partner of infidelity, even though they've shown nothing but devotion to you and you have no plausible evidence that you have been betrayed, right? Now, why would that maybe happen? If you have been cheated on before or cheated on multiple times, then that starts becoming your truth in your emotions, right? Despite having in various ways demonstrated that you are worthwhile as anyone else, you remain convinced that you're somehow worthless, for you can't overcome core feelings of worthlessness. By the way, that is exactly why we are doing the self-worth work the first month of RQ. Because sometimes we just have these core feelings. And by the way, they're not like, oh, I wonder why that is. There's a reason, right? But we have core feelings of worthlessness that are not true. So you have to dissect that and hack it and start rewiring your brain. Last one here. You feel stupid, right? So you feel stupid about something, so you're convinced you must be dumb, regardless of the fact that maybe you have good grades in school or as an adult, you've achieved at least as much as those around you, right? What we have an emotional feeling about, we start creating an emotional truth and believe it to be an actual truth. So, how do you make sure that you are not acting from that emotional reasoning bias? Well, guess what? Let's jump into the topic today, and I'm going to tell you how to do it. All right. So, before I go any further, if you have not watched Tinder Swindler, you probably want to stop right now. It's a little less than 2 hours. It's a worthwhile watch, especially if you're going to listen to this podcast. And there are going to be spoilers all over the place. So if you think that you want to watch it and you don't want all of it to be spoiled by what I'm going to tell you, please stop this, head over to Netflix, watch it, and then come back to this podcast because I am going to be sharing all of the things. So let me give a very quick plot for those of you who are just fucking rebels and are like, I'm not going to watch that, but I am willing to listen to this. That's okay too, right? So just a little short plot here so you guys know what the hell I'm even talking about. So this is a documentary that came out just last week. I feel so relevant right now. I am always behind on shit. I always discover things like 6 months to 2 years later than everybody else, or I'll hear people talking about it, but I'm always on something else. And then I'm like, oh, this is really good. And then everybody's moved on. Story of my life. So according to a USA Today article, this is how they described it. The 2-hour documentary Thrill Ride exposes Shimon Hyatt, so that is one of the names he goes by, who allegedly conned women he found on the dating app Tinder. 2 women featured in the film, Pernilla Sjöholm and Cecilia Fjellhoy, said he told them he was Simon Lviv, fictitious son of Lev Lviv, the billionaire founder of Julie's jewelry supplier LLD Diamonds. So that person does actually exist. There is a billionaire out there named Lev Lviv who does own this Julie's supply of LL Diamonds. Guess who is not his son? Spoiler alert. On Hyatt's first date with Cecilia, he proposed an impromptu trip via private jet. And unfortunately, according to the documentary, Hyatt's jet-setter lifestyle and stays at the Four Seasons were bankrolled by his victims. After a while, as he's dating them, he claimed his life was in danger and that he needed to access their credit cards and cash so that his supposed enemies wouldn't be able to trace his whereabouts. Pernilla estimates that she gave him about $40,000, and yeah, $40,000, or it actually could be euros. And Cecilia puts her estimate at upward of 200,000. Per the film, it is estimated that he has swindled about $10 million from victims across the globe. Yeah. So first of all, this is super interesting when this came out Because people, whenever there's something like this, people are always like DMing me on Instagram. My OMers love to be like, Kira, have you seen this yet? I want to know your thoughts. Right. So everybody's right away. Have you seen this? And so I'm like, 2 hours, I can do that. Right. Like I can do that. Sometimes it's after talking all day, every day about love and relationships, it's kind of hard to sometimes watch stuff like this. But very quickly, I found this decently interesting. And I was like, there's a story here. And this is definitely a podcast for sure. No questions about it. So here are 5 things that we can take away from this documentary, Tinder Swindler. Now, my very last thing is going to be a little bit about these women and the choices they made in the situation, because I've been seeing a lot of positive and negative response to this, of course. But I think that if we start looking for, and not that this guy was not to blame because he fucking absolutely is, and the lack of accountabilities he has had for his actions is amazingly disgusting. However, there is also another culprit here. There's also another problem, and it's a problem that exists outside of this guy and outside of these women. And that number one thing is stop fucking believing in bullshit fairy tales. Please, for all that is well and good. They open this up by first of all, she quoted that like the best place to meet people is online. That's still not factual. Still, the best numbers we have from all the online dating apps together is about 20%. That's still not the number one way to meet people. Just throwing that out there. So that's not even real. But right away, she starts talking about the fairy tale, right? Growing up on Disney, growing up on all of these princesses being saved. She talked about how she loved Beauty and the Beast, which I'm not going to lie, in the past was also like my favorite Disney princess movie because it felt a little less shallow than the rest. But a couple years ago, somebody brought something up and I had to dig into it. And I was like, yeah, nope, that's not good. But this ultimately happened because our society, our media are constantly selling bullshit romance ideals to people, especially women, so they can't even recognize a sociopath. Because I want to talk about for a second that they've never used this words through the documentary, but the articles that I was researching and things like that, and I completely agree, this guy is a full-on sociopath. He is not a bad dater, right? He is not He's not a jerk or an asshole. This guy is an actual sociopath who is potentially harmful to the people in his way. So I want to talk a little bit about that for a second. But so what is a sociopath versus somebody that you dated who ghosted you? Because there are two very different things. Number one, the definition of a sociopath is a person with a personality disorder manifesting itself in extreme antisocial attitudes and behavior and a lack of conscience. Okay. So here, more importantly, what are some of the personality traits of a sociopath? If you don't know, if you are new to this podcast, if you are still wrapped up in 50 Shades of Grey or Twilight, if you are reading romance novels and waiting for your Jamie from Outlander to come save you, here are things that you need to if you want to believe in romantic bullshit. And not that romance doesn't exist, but it doesn't exist like this. And you certainly want to stay away from somebody who is, and that's what a sociopath does, manipulates the situation and your feelings so that you are confused. Okay. So first of all, what is a sociopath? Lack of empathy for others, impulsive behavior, attempting to control others with threats or aggression. So we see at the end as these women start getting wise and going, what's actually happening here? Tell the truth. This guy turned. He went from honey, honey to if you fucking tell anybody, I will come after you. They use intelligence, charm, or charisma to manipulate others. That's 100% what happened here. They did not learn from mistakes or punishment. So before this even happened, he had spent 2 years in a Finnish prison, I believe, for these exact crimes against 3 Finnish women. Yet, here he is, changing his name and doing it again. Lying for personal gain, 100%. Showing a tendency to physical violence and fights, that's not necessarily, we don't see that as much, but we don't know. Generally superficial relationships. It's amazing what these women thought that they were dating or buying into or getting with this guy versus what he actually is. And I'm also going to talk about that. Sometimes stealing or committing other crimes. They can also threaten suicide to manipulate without intention to act. And those are the biggest things that make this a sociopath. So this isn't, I know, like right away one of my OMers was like, I'm scared to watch it. I'm like, don't be scared. Don't be scared. This is information that anybody who is out there dating should be watching and watching for, because so many people have been sold on this BS idea. And even though this happened in Europe, there are, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but the percentages that I have seen is about 1/3 of people on online dating are not who they say they are. Right now, some of them are downright scammers. If you don't know this about online dating, this is a major thing. You need to be aware of it. And it's not usually on this kind of level, but there are still people who will get to know you, will make them believe that something about who they are that isn't true, and then ask or steal things from you. This is very real. And let me tell you the first thing. So I'm going to talk mostly about Cecilia. She is who they open up with. Her story kind of leads into the other ones. But the most interesting thing to me, and I want to hear what you guys thought, because I'm sure you have thoughts about this. But as she's telling that story in the beginning, and I don't really know where it's going, I have a general idea, right? There was some very big Manson family vibes for me. So I am always interested in kind of true crime and serial killers and things like that, just because I am fascinated by the psychology of it. And I'm guessing this is true of a lot of women. In fact, I was even looking at an article about why women in particular are so fascinated with true crime. I'll probably share that. It was super interesting, but I watched a couple years ago. I'm not remembering where it's at right now, but I think it was called Manson: The Women. And it was basically interviewing and telling about the women who not only surrounded Manson, but ended up killing for him, ended up creating all of these or doing all of these crimes for him, right? And how some of the women that they interview still talk like he's the best thing that ever happened to them. That is what true manipulation and brainwashing does. That 30, 40, 50 years later, these women are still like, Charlie just got me. Charlie just saw me in a way that nobody ever else has. And you're watching and you're like, what? This is pants. What is up with these women? But it was amazing to me that Cecilia is retelling this story about them, quote unquote, falling in love, how she met him, the whole whirlwind romance. And she's smiling and she's laughing. And I can't tell you how good it felt to be his girl, the one that he chose. And you're like, I'm sorry, what? What? Because that feels crazy. But once again, this is what manipulation really does. And this is what somebody who is a sociopath is really fucking good at. It was so strange to me to watch her just sharing the story. And I rewatched part of it this morning just to get some quotes and things like that. And I just was still, I think that they have debunked Stockholm syndrome, but it's like that no matter if you have been taken advantage of or manipulated by somebody, sometimes the charm, the charisma, and those feelings that you felt about them, whether they were those feelings that you felt were real, whether they are based on true information, is what's interesting, because they weren't, right? But that doesn't mean we don't still attach ourselves to those emotions we have, those emotions that we felt were falling in love. But moving on to number 2, they didn't really fall for him. They fell for the emotions he manipulated and the emotional reasoning bias. Absolutely. That emotional reasoning bias that we just talked about in the science fact, that was a major player here for sure. So How did this emotional reasoning bias show up? So, first of all, since she felt excited, special, and important, because that's what he was making her feel, she assumed he was a good person. She assumed that what he was saying was true. She assumed that he was sincere about the feelings that he was talking or that he shared with her about her, even when things start going south. Even when, doesn't even matter. She was still like, I know that all of us, and I'm going to talk about this in a second, want to be like, what were these women thinking? This is crazy. I can't believe they would do that. And then we all get very high on our judgmental horses going, that would never happen to me. I would never fall for that. And even while you're watching it, you're going, he's asking for first $10,000, $25,000, another $25,000. And you're like sitting there watching as they're like handing it over. And by the way, what I found so remarkable about this is he was not stealing from rich women who had all this money. He was stealing from women who I could only guess had really good fucking credit, right? Because they were able to get hundreds of thousands of dollars from different banks and different credit cards, but they did not actually have the money themselves, which is the craziest part about this for me. But even as they keeps asking and asking, and he's like calling them and demanding. It's so easy to watch and judge and be like, honey, how did you not get that what this was? She had emotional reasoning bias because of the manipulated emotions, how he treated her those first 24 hours. It triggered her attachment style. I'm going to go into that in a second. It triggered her self-worth, right? It triggered, I think, a bunch of different biases that really had her not questioning what he was saying. So I'm gonna read a little bit of some parts that came up and quotes that she said about this, right? So first of all, even though things had went very quickly between us, she said, but when I sit there and feel an emotional connection with someone and they're opening up, that's just how I am as a person. So right away, she's just justifying like this guy felt so real. And she like acknowledged like this was very quick. That's like the understatement of the year, honey. But that's just how I am as a person. That when somebody opens up to me, I open up to them or I accept them in. And we have to do better. I'm not going to take that away from anybody, but we do have to do better than that. We cannot just make quick judgments off of what seems to be true. Next, she said, I feel like I would be stupid if I said no. So when he asked her after knowing her for about an hour or two, right? Hear me out. Ready? After knowing her for about an hour or two, after having a drink or two at a hotel fucking bar, he invites her on a private jet to go to Bulgaria with him. And she says, I feel like I'd be stupid if I said no. And then she said, keep cool. You like this guy, right? Okay. No, you and I both know. She literally knew nothing about this guy. And one of the things that I say is we don't do this work just for us. We do this work so that we can ask better questions. So we can say, wait a second, all I know about them is what they're telling me, but is that actually true? Here's some more emotional reasoning bias that came up. She said, just feeling like you're his girl is the best feeling in the world. He had manipulated her so much that after meeting for 24 hours, and by the way, he started asking for money, from what I can tell, after them spending about 2 or 3 dates together. So this woman ended up giving over $200,000 after 2 or 3 dates in real life. Another thing that she said, it felt like stepping into a movie. He played the romantic, swept up to a T. And at one point she's, I'm missing him so much. I'll never be able to see you. And then he shows up in Oslo and she's, oh my gosh, you're such a busy guy. And you decided to take a private jet to see me. So his constant manipulation made her feel like she wasn't really good enough for him so that he could whisk in and then make her feel special. And she would like not question the manipulation. So how do the shows up? So first of all, he makes him feel super special within that 24 hours. And then one of the interesting things that happens is he said to her after they ended up in Sofia, Bulgaria, "We're so busy." So after he sleeps with her, after he takes this on a private jet, after he has her meet his ex and slash baby mama and child, we'll get to that in a minute. He says, "We're so busy, it's best that you go back home." And I was disappointed. I wanted to spend more time with him because he had manipulated her to believe that he was this amazing, romantic, around the world traveler and famous and important and wealthy. And somebody choosing to want to spend time with her made her feel more worthy, even though it was bullshit. So I have to stop here for a second and say, this is a little bit where your self-worth shit comes up. When we're looking for someone else to make us feel worthy, for someone else to choose us, for someone else to make us feel special, for someone else to wine and dine and dote us or dote all over us, that's where we can end up making some really crucially bad decisions. Or as I like to call them, piss poor decisions, right? When you're looking for someone else to make you feel special because you don't actually feel that way about yourself inside, that's how you can get taken advantage of. That's how these biases can play out even more. So when he said, "We're so busy, it's best that you go back home," after this very like whirlwind romance evening, he makes them feel super special, but then after that rejects them. So it'll dig into their insecurities and self-worth and their attachment styles. So they will feel desperate for his attention and just so happy when he reaches out and then eventually chooses them, which we know he never really does because he's literally sending exact same videos to girl after girl after girl, right? From the exact same places. "Hey, honey, I love you." Aileen, "Hey, honey, I love you." Pernelia, you know what I mean? Like all of these different women are actually getting the exact same videos and messages from him. He also constantly texts her to let her believe that he is consistent and that she is special without even spending time with her. That's how he keeps the emotional manipulation going. And my guess is that it was probably inconsistent, where he would be all about her and then boom, she doesn't hear from him for a little bit. So that when he comes back in, she's like, "Boosh. Okay, good. He's still in. I'm still special. This is still going on." And that happens a lot. That's the shit that happens to the normal people like us who have anxious attachment styles, where somebody can even unknowingly manipulate us by being inconsistent. And then we chase after them because of that inconsistency. Now, one more thing I want to talk about before we go on is when he invites her on the plane. So after a couple hour discussion, she then sends text to a group of female friends, right? And I would like to mention that Matilda, her friend, to me is the real hero of this story, as well as Aileen, which we can discuss in a little bit. So she tells her friends who are like, "I'm sorry, what?" And then one of them's like, "I can't," right? And then Matilda's, "This does not sound safe. Who is this guy? How do you know him? You could be abducted." So good. Good on Matilda for bringing some reasoning to this. But here is what's mind-blowing to me is Cecilia said, "I didn't even think about that. I'm on a date, you know?" Nope. I mean, without being like a catastrophizer, which is another cognitive bias, there's 1,000 things that could have happened to her in that situation. And honestly, losing money is one of the better ones. Rape, assault, taken and put into trafficking. There is a lot of shit. You cannot, I don't give a shit who you think this person is. I don't give a shit how much money they have, how charming they are, how charismatic, how magnetic they feel, how you think you've met the one in 4 minutes or less. You cannot fucking go on private planes with people. Just don't do it, everybody. First of all, private planes. People keep dying in private planes. John Denver, Ricky Nelson. I know, weird references by Kira. Kobe, like private planes, first of all. But what Cecilia says back next to them, which brings me on to point 3, is she puts YOLO, YOLO, which, if you don't know, means you only live once. And I want to remind you in point 3 here, one of the other thing that I feel like is unhelpful that TV and media and just different romantic things teach us is love is exciting and intense and passionate, and you have to run after it and grab it. And I'll tell you this, which is a little bit of a womp womp. I just had to do it. Oh, wait. Thank you. There's no YOLO in real love. There's no, you only live once. To me, when we blame, right? And I feel that we do YOLO and we're like, I'm following my heart. And that's just justification for, I'm making poor decisions and I'm blaming it on a different part of me than my brain. Here's the truth about this. Love takes time. More importantly, relationships that help bring love up on a daily basis take time. And they also have a normal timeline. No matter the money, how people look, the chemistry, the spark, the sex, the magnetism, the sense of humor, you will not know for quite a while if that's a person who can truly be a partner to you. I feel like because we're so uncomfortable in our uncomfortable feelings, meaning not knowing how the other person maybe feels about us or not knowing if it's going anywhere, because we are so uncomfortable sitting in those uncomfortable feelings, we rush things, we push things, we jump on, we YOLO them. You only live once. I'm going to chase this person halfway across the world because you only live once, instead of just rationally getting to know them and seeing if this could actually go somewhere. There is not YOLO in real love. In real love, there is beautiful consistency. There is a calm. There is joy. There isn't a roller coaster. Reason 4. So learning from Tinder Swindler, right? And seeing that not only Cecilia, but Pernilla, which that was super fascinating because they were not even romantically involved. She was just his friend, but he was still able to manipulate that friendship. And then near the end, we actually meet Aileen, somebody who he'd been dating for 14 months. So I'm instantly going, does he really like her more than the rest of them? But you also found out that I think that she had given him over $140,000, right? So we also learned that. But Cecilia started getting taken advantage of after month 1. And there was no really rhyme or reason to it. But how do we beat that emotional reasoning bias? How do we not walk on the clouds when we're not really sure who this person is and what they're about? Always go back to the facts. Write that down. Think about it. Always go back to the facts. When I have a client who's, you know what, I think I really like somebody, I'm not sure, like they're really confused and their head's all like in crazy places about it, I'm like, go back to the facts. Write down everything that's an absolute truth in this situation so far. Not even just like what they told you, but absolute truths. And when we do go back to those facts, a lot of times we realize maybe we don't know that person that well, right? Maybe a lot of what we're attaching to is actually the story in our head of who they could be to us than who they actually are. I know regularly, I say to my clients, go back to the facts, because then you can make a decision, a factual decision, because we still have to attach our brain when it comes to love. This whole 2-hour TV show, and the thing is like we met 3 women. We didn't meet the multiple other women that he's obviously taking advantage of over the years. I don't know, maybe even men. I don't know that much about it. But I question if some of these women actually sat down with a friend about what this really, really was instead of what he told them it was, if this would have necessarily happened or played out the exact same way. So in this situation, I want to quickly go through the facts with you. Here's what we know to be true. Within 24 hours, he meets her for a drink and they talk. We're supposed to assume that within a couple of hours, he actually says, I'd love to get to know you more, and invites her on a private plane to Bulgaria. So within 2 hours of knowing this person, they invite you on a private plane to a foreign country. Red flag? Much? Maybe? Yeah. Okay. Next, we'll pretend like that's normal or okay. When she gets on the plane, his baby mama and child are also there. And she like coquettishly says, oh my gosh, his ex is on our first date. What? What? So they meet, he invites her in a private plane where his baby mama and child are also. They hit Bulgaria. They sleep together right away. We had this perfect kiss. And by the way, sleeping together right away is another way that people manipulate by building faux intimacy. Because of the chemicals that are happening in your body when you have sex, when you orgasm, it creates that faux intimacy that you can trust them. Next, he makes her feel needed when he tells her that he has scars on his back from a wrongful imprisonment in South Africa. So it's interesting because I feel like this guy is probably like a psychological genius, honestly, in some level, because what he did here is he is creating a vulnerability. He is creating a trust, like I'm sharing my deep, dark secrets with you. He's creating a space where she can start to see her role is to love him and take care of him because he is this person that she almost wants to save because his lifestyle and his job is so unsafe. The whole fucking pretty women, I'm going to save him right back. He just swept me off my feet and now I'm going to save him right back. It's crazy. And then, right away they sleep together and everything. And then he sends her home. And then he plays this so well because then I never thought I'd hear from him again. And they're like in the palm of his hand by not reaching out to them. They're like, start missing him, start missing what this could be, start inventing these stories of all the places they could travel and all the things that they could do together and yada, yada, yada. But it's all not true. At one point, he then starts contacting them and says, I'm serious about you. Do you want to be my girlfriend? From what I can tell from this documentary, they had met 3 times. 3 times. So number 5, and here's what I really want to say to everybody. Whatever you want to believe. And let me tell you, as I was watching this, my jaw was dropping. I had 1,000 different thoughts, many of them highly judgmental, basically thinking if these ladies were my ladies, my clients, this would not have happened. But I don't want to discount the fact that this took courage for them to speak up about it. After hearing like all of the backlash that they got online, and I'm sure will continue to for quite a while, whatever you want to believe, no one deserves to be scammed out of hundreds of thousands of dollars because they truly believed a person they cared for was going to be hurt or their life was in danger. I want you to think about that. Even if you think that these women were gold diggers or whatever, no one deserves to be scammed out of hundreds of thousands of dollars because they believed a person that they cared about was going to be hurt. This guy is a professional liar and manipulator. He is a literal sociopath. And ultimately, blaming these victims are our own biases that we have bought into. Yeah. See what I did there? Such as, there was a great article, I'm going to share it, that shared these about victim blaming because we like to do that, right? We looked at this, we listened to these women tell the story, and then we're instantly like, oh my God, that would never happen to me. I would never do that. Who are these women? Maybe you're right, but maybe you're not. So one of the biases that we have that we turn around and then blame the victim instead of this guy who, by the way, in case you don't know or don't remember, is serving 0 time for any of this that happened. He ended up doing another 5 months, although he was given, I think, a year and a half. But because he got out for good behavior, he served 5 months in Israel, where he's from, for past crimes. He got nothing for taking advantage of these women. So we have a hindsight bias. So first of all, when we look at an event that happened in the past, we have a tendency to believe that we should have been able to see the signs and predict the outcome. And this hindsight makes it seem like the victims of a crime, accident, or other form of misfortune should have also been able to predict and prevent whatever problem might have befallen them. And this isn't just something that happens when we are looking at things such as rape or assault or scamming. When somebody becomes ill, people often seek blame past behaviors for a person's current state of health. Cancer, they should have stopped smoking. Heart disease, I guess they should have exercised more. Food poisoning, they should have known better than to eat at that new restaurant. Such cases of blame seem to suggest that people should have simply known or expected such things to happen given their behavior, while in truth, there was no way to predict that outcome. Ultimately, unless you have been personally scammed, I don't know. I don't know if we would all do things completely different. I don't know if we can sit on our throne all high and mighty. And I'll tell you this, in my toughest times, when I felt low and fat and unattractive, I certainly never gave people hundreds of $1,000s, but I certainly let people take advantage of me. I let people into my life that shouldn't have been there. I let people stick around a lot longer than they should have. And they didn't fucking take me on a private jet. The second cognitive bias that comes up is we like to believe that life is fair when it isn't. This is actually called a just world phenomenon, or the just world fallacy. Our tendency to blame the victim also stems in part from our need to believe that the world is a fair and just place. When something bad happens to another person, we often believe that they must have done something to deserve such a fate. Social psychologists refer to this tendency as the just world phenomenon, or just world fallacy. And the question is, why do we feel this need to believe that the world is just and that people get what they deserve? Because if we think that the world is not fair, then it becomes more apparent that anyone can fall victim to tragedy. Yes, even you, your friends, your family, and your loved ones. No matter how cautious and conscientious you might be, bad things can and do happen to good people. But by believing the world is fair, by believing that people deserve what they get, and by blaming the victim, people are able to protect their illusion that such terrible things could never happen to them. So the next time you find yourself wondering what someone else did to bring on their misfortune, take a moment to consider the psychological attributions and biases that affect your judgment. Rather than blame the victim, try putting yourself in that person's shoes and perhaps try a little empathy or compassion. And by the way, if your empathy and compassion's a little low, start with self-worth. Because with self-worth comes self-compassion. And man, we are a lot more compassionate about the world when we like ourselves. Now, if you are ever worried about being scammed online, which honestly is a real fucking fear. It's a real fear. I think we know that I'm not a huge fan of online dating. I also know that we're still in a pandemic. And if there are people who are wanting to meet people, it is one of the ways to do so. But I also think we can be online dating so much smarter and safer and better. So what I actually been working on, and this just tied right into it, is an online dating ninja workbook. Yeah, I know I'm ridiculous, right? So that you can become an online dating ninja. And it's just small mindsets and tools to make online dating suck a little less. And definitely being taken for hundreds of $1,000s would be sucky. A couple things that are going to be in this workbook that you can download for free are basic smart mindsets for online dating, stuff that you maybe haven't even thought about, but because this is what the shit that goes through my brain all day, every day, I have. Basic red flags to watch out for, not only for this, but for people who are not emotionally or physically available. A dating safely checklist. Guess what's not on it? Don't get on private planes to foreign countries with someone you've known for less than 12 hours. And this is the big deal I'm really a little proud of. The 8 questions you can ask before you even meet someone. So this comes from a TikTok, actually, where a therapist said, these are 15 questions you should ask on a first date. And although I don't completely agree that all of them are first date questions, but hey, because we all get to have different opinions, and I'm sure he is great at what he does. What I did do is I said, instead of even first date questions, some of these questions should be questions that before we even meet people. So we can just make sure we're on the same page, we have similar values, and we're looking in the same direction. So I created these 8 questions that are simple. You have to be able to answer them yourselves too, but it just gets everybody on the same page. And it also might just weed out people so that your time in public during a pandemic is actually smart and worthwhile. I never want to say that spending time with somebody is a waste. But what I do know is if you know what kind of relationship you want, if you know you want kids or don't want kids, if some things that are really important and that you value, we need to take the emotions out of that and just ask questions. Hey, was this what you're looking for too? If it's not, that's cool. But then I'm probably going to move on to somebody who is. That shit's sexy. That shit, people knowing what they want and having boundaries, by the way, that's not demanding. That's not pushing people away. That's not walls. That is smart dating. All right. What do you guys think? Did you learn anything? You know, I love to hear from you. Slide into my DMs on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook, or email me at kira@reinventingdating.com. What did you learn? What surprised you? Anything mind-blowing? And I do want to just remind everybody that the Black Friday sale for intensives for singles, and I have this weekend thrown out an option for new couples, is still on sale through Friday. So if you haven't checked it out yet, definitely do. You and I spending 5 hours together, topic of your choice. You get pre-work for 2 weeks. You get 30 days afterwards to talk to me, and it's either for yourself or for a new couple under a year for $1,000. Now, I know $1,000 is $1,000. That's a lot of fucking money. But I can guarantee that after we spend a whole day together and you get a customized action plan for yourself, as well as 30 days with support, you will find nothing out there that is this good of a deal. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening today. Check it out, reinventingdating.com. And until on Friday we talk, meet love halfway.